Welcome to Chapter Endnotes. This month we are discussing The House in Paris by Elizabeth Bowen. And my name is Stacey Goldring, and I'm so glad you can be with us. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I usually don't explain an entire book. I usually don't do a whole summary. I assume that people come having read the book or they realize that this is going to be full of spoilers. However, in this case, because this is a book that deals with time and time bending, please humor me as I try to explain the plot to you of The House in Paris. The book takes place over one day. It's one day. So let's build a structure and understand that when you read The House in Paris, you're dealing with one day. The book is divided into three parts. We have the present, the past, and then we come back to the present. Okay. So we're going to begin with part one. Enter Henrietta and Leopold. These are both children in the first part of the book who are waiting for the next legs of their respective journeys. They're both going someplace, and they've come to the house in Paris, waiting for that next step in their life. Henrietta Mountjoy is an 11-year-old girl. She's passing through on the way to meet her grandmother. So she lives in England. She's comes to the Gare du Nord, and she arrives there uncomfortably early in the morning. She's never been to Paris before. Her grandmother lives in the south of France. She's going to visit her, but she has to stay. It's like the longest layover ever. She has to stay in Paris for a few hours before she catches the train later in the day. Her grandma has a friend who lives in Paris who has agreed to have her spend that time at her house. So what do you do when you go to Paris? Well, you want to see the sights, right? And so that's what Henrietta wants to do throughout the entire book. All Henrietta wants to do is get the hell out of the house and see the Trocadero and the other sights around Paris. A very nervous woman named Naomi Fisher comes and picks her up from the train station. Henrietta is a wise little girl. She's no fool, and she sizes up Naomi right away and realizes basically this woman is kind of a hot mess. And this woman, Miss Fisher, tells Henrietta that there is going to be a little boy at the house and his name is Leopold. And she cautions Henrietta not to ask too many questions. Now, wait a minute. Henrietta's not happy. She's a little bit of a control freak. She likes her clothes just so. She doesn't like people playing with her toys, etc. And now there's a Leopold on the scene. She did not plan for that. So she goes into the house not pleased. She has breakfast and a nap upon arrival. She takes a snooze on the sofa. And when she wakes up, there's this odd boy, Leopold, kind of like staring at her from the other end of the salon. Leopold is waiting to meet his mother for the very first time. He has spent the 9 anguished years of his entire life with foster parents in Italy, and he's been wondering why his parents don't want him. So he has come to this house to meet the mother he's never met, Karen, I believe it's pronounced Michaelis. So these children, it's kind of almost like a cage match. They're sizing each other up, and they're trying to feel each other out, like friends, enemy, I'm not sure, etc. And all of a sudden, Henrietta is summoned upstairs to meet Madame Fisher. This is Henrietta's grandmother's friend. And we all know that Madame Fisher is sick. So there is this heaviness in the house. Madame Fisher lives on the second floor. She's not well. We have to be quiet. There's a little boy. He's here. Don't ask too many questions. This is a book that opens, and all of a sudden you're feeling a little claustrophobic. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of structure. So she basically goes upstairs and she meets this very scary lady in a kind of a smelly room. Everything about it is old and gross. And this woman basically tells Henrietta that Leopold's father downstairs broke the heart of Naomi, her daughter. And Henrietta's just hearing about this. And, she's not quite sure really what to make of it. She just wants to get out of the room, leave the house, and go see the sights in Paris. Meanwhile, downstairs in the salon, Leopold is rummaging through Miss Fisher's purse, and she finds 3 letters. There's a letter about Henrietta that is written by Henrietta's grandmother, explaining that Henrietta is going to come stay. Please have her stay for a few hours. And then she's kind of scolding Miss Fisher that she has not come to visit her to south of France. The second envelope has a Berlin postmark, and it is from his mother, but the envelope is empty. This third is an envelope from Marion Grant Moody, the adoptive grandmother, and it is also to Miss Fisher, explaining Leopold's itinerary and writing exhaustively of Leopold's delicate, unstable constitution. The boy hasn't really had any exposure to sex education. He doesn't really know what's going on. So just anything about his birth, don't say anything. Just let's just smooth over that. Henrietta comes back downstairs. She sees that he's been rummaging through the letters, scolds him. Then they have lunch, they play cards, and the doorbell rings. A few minutes later, Miss Fisher walks back into the room, her face filled with regret and pity. And she says to Leopold, "Your mother is not coming. She cannot come." When he learns she cannot come, he tries to put on a strong face. He faces the mantle, and the mantle is a very important motif in this book. He faces the mantle. He tries to be strong, but he dissolves into tears. There is a scholar on Elizabeth Bowen. His name is Neil Cochran, and he says about Leopold's reaction to his mother not coming, quote, the novel's most concentrated expression of the psychological and emotional wounding that is parentlessness. So this is what she achieves in this book, this feeling of aloneness and parentlessness. And this ends the present. Now we enter the past. So now we're going to bend time and we're going to go backwards a decade. There's a quote at the opening of this section, quote, meetings that do not come off keep a character of their own. Meetings that do not come off keep a character of their own. We all know about situations we've been in, meetings we had where we walk away and go, that didn't go right. And it kind of just leaves a sick feeling in your stomach. So we go back a decade in the past and we find ourselves in the introductory pages that is an imagination of Leopold imagining that his mother is speaking to him. We are dealing with a book that is written in the style of modernism. So this is where things get a little Philip Roth Zuckerman-esque. We're not sure who the narrator is. We're not sure to whom they're talking, etc. So you just got to go with it. So just stay with me. Don't give up yet. Leopold has no way of knowing that his mother or anything about his mother. And he has no idea that his mother in the present is married to a Ray Forestier. So he has no idea of his mother and who she is. All he knows is that she cannot come. So this section contains information that may have been exchanged between Karen and Leopold, should she have kept her promise to her son and arrived as scheduled in the house in Paris. So he imagines this. So anyway, after those few pages, the section goes on to tell about Karen, the mother, and his father, Max, meeting after years apart and having an affair that results in Leopold's conception. So we're in a book that is dealing with the past, where we are now going into the further past. It's become very meta. And then going forward, after years apart of having an affair, resulting in Leopold's conception, while Leopold's father, Max, was married to Naomi, the neurotic one in the first section of the book, and his mother is already engaged to this Ray Forrester, who in the present she's still married to. So these two people who are promised to others have this affair, right? And they meet and they decide, this is in the past, they decide that they're going to tell their betrothed that they need to break up and they're going to run away and have this life together. So Karen and Max are going to go ahead and have a future together. But it just doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. Okay, so anyway, now I'm going to bring you to Karen and to the present in this section. And Karen does not want to get married. She doesn't want to get married, and she wants to delay this marriage, this engagement to Ray as long as she can, because she's trying to just stall for time. So she asks her parents if she can go to leave England and visit her aunt and uncle in County Cork, Ireland. So she basically goes there to just stop time. Again, stop time, we're dealing with time, and just contemplate. She's so ambivalent about the wedding. So what she does is she hangs out with her aunt and uncle, and really not much happens in this section of the book. She just basically is stalling for time. And then she decides to come back to England. And when she arrives home, she sees that her friend Naomi is waiting for her. Naomi has a pleasant surprise for her, explaining that she is going to marry Max, and she wants Naomi to meet her. Now, I have to apologize because I kind of skipped ahead earlier and already told you that they have an affair. But at this point, no one knows that anyone has had an affair. So I really apologize for bending time like that. So she goes to Ireland. She comes back. Her friend Naomi is there. Naomi's like, you have to meet Max. And Karen does not want to meet him. She doesn't want to meet him because she knew him from long ago, going back into the past again, because she spent some time at this house in Paris, because the house in Paris used to be like a finishing school, or not so much a finishing school, but a place where young girls would go, young British girls would go and spend some time in Paris to become refined, to become educated in the culture of the continent before they would go off and get married. And this is where she met Naomi, because her mother ran this kind of boarding house. And she remembers seeing Max there once or twice, and he made her feel very uncomfortable. So Max is this dark, taunt, brilliant young man who Madame Fisher seemed to take a real liking to, but Naomi repelled. And Karen repelled. But Naomi is convinced to have her good friend, Karen, and Max meet because she wants her friend's approval. On the very last day that Naomi is visiting with Karen, she agrees to see Max. Where does this happen? Well, our author does things that she likes to work in twos. She likes to balance things. So I mentioned earlier that Karen goes to see her aunt and uncle in Ireland. Well, Naomi has now come to England because an aunt has passed away, and she's closing up the house, and the house is all the furniture is being moved, because that's where Naomi and Max are going to live once they get married. So we have another house as a motif that enters the book, and this is the house where there is a cherry tree in the backyard, and the scene under the cherry tree has stayed with me for years. I cannot forget this scene. They decide to meet at the house, In the backyard, they set up a little picnic area, the three of them. Naomi is kind of like a servant. She's preparing tea. She's washing the dishes. She's got her head wrapped in something. She's wearing like an apron. And outside, very little is said between Max and between Karen. But from the very few words that our author allows us to hear, the tension builds because we realize that these people are incredibly attracted to one another. Incredibly attracted. And we'll talk about later about how she uses the beautiful motifs of nature and light and time in order to build that tension and explain the tension. So that night, Karen says goodbye at the station to both Max and to Naomi as they are going to make their way back to France. And at the train station, there's just a swarm of people that come by, and the crowd smushes Karen and Max close to one another, and they end up looking into each other's eyes, and like something out of a 1940s film, the dark fate is like sealed. And unfortunately, Karen never sees Max again. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. Sorry. Don't say that. Let's just go ahead and delete that for 1 minute. She thinks she's never going to see him again. But what happens is a few months later, Karen's aunt now passes away, the one in Ireland. And what ends up happening is it throws her whole house into disarray. Her mother, her father, they have to plan a funeral. Her uncle is distraught, etc. And then one night the phone rings, but there's no call waiting. But she decides, there's no caller ID, but Karen goes into her father's study and picks up the phone, and it's Max, and he has to see her. So they agree to meet. And they decide to meet in Boulogne the following Sunday. And even though it's the two of them and they're all alone and they are meeting, in secret, we feel the weight of Madame Fisher and we feel the weight of Naomi with them. Nothing happens between the two at this time, but before they depart, they agree to meet again a week later. And it is that week later on a Saturday night when they make love. Karen awakens in the middle of the night and she speaks to Leopold in the future. She develops a type of unconsciousness, this awareness of Leopold, despite having no clear evidence that he will exist, suggested by the author, which our author suggests using second person, quote, all the same, the idea of you, Leopold, began to be present. The idea of you, Leopold, began to be present with her, unquote. So this author is going back and forth using first person, second person, third person, all the persons. She's using them even in the same sentence. After they go ahead and consummate their love, they decide that they must marry, but they don't want to hurt Naomi. So they go ahead and decide to tell her in person. Well, they're going to send a letter. Max is going to send a letter, and then they're going to tell her in person. And they agree that they will spend their life together. And this is the part where Karen never, ever sees Max again. The next time she hears from Naomi, it is when she crosses the channel and comes to see Karen and explains how Max has slashed his wrists and killed himself after talking to Naomi's mother. This book is not an endorsement of motherhood on any page. Naomi explains that after she received his letter informing Madame Fisher and Naomi that he is not going to follow through on his engagement to Naomi, he comes to the house and Max meets with the mother, and that is when his suicide occurs. So now, besides Naomi, conveying all this to her friend, you have to ask yourself, does Naomi know? Does she know that she and Max have had a relationship or not? And that will be up for us to discuss. But anyway, Karen reveals to Naomi that indeed she's carrying Max's child. Naomi then gets the Friend of the Year award because she says, well, we're going to do everything we can to find this child a good home, because she's not going to, given the time that this takes in the 1930s, she's unwed and she can't keep the baby. So part 3, we go back to the present. And what the author does is she picks up from the last line of the first section, and it opens with, your mother is not coming. She cannot come. So then Leopold is then summoned to Madame Fisher's sick room. So we're again balancing out everything in the book. So now he goes upstairs, and Madame Fisher basically tells him everything that I just told you, that his mother had this illicit affair, that she slept with Naomi's intended, and that's how you ended up here. And basically, she couldn't come, and you're just going to have to learn to live with it. And it's the most cruel exchange, really, in the entire book. But Leopold reacts by saying, can I please just stay? The reason being, he's just grateful now to know the truth. And then the doorbell rings. We hear Naomi running downstairs to get the door. She runs back upstairs and she gets Leopold. And then we go back downstairs, open the door to the salon. And who is waiting for Leopold? Ray, Karen's husband. The man we've heard very little from throughout the entire book. But Ray of hope, ray of sunshine, Ray has come because he has decided, whether completely against Karen's intentions or not, we can discuss, that this child needs to be with his mother, or this child needs someone who loves him. And he decides that that's going to be him. He is going to now propel the story forward. It is not until the end of the book that we have any movement forward for either of these children. So very practically, at the end of the book, Naomi needs a ride to the train station. So that's what the ending scenes are at the train station with Ray and Leopold and Henrietta after a very hectic taxi ride where Ray, obviously, who's never had any children, is not used to being in the back of a taxi with basically the Cheerios falling everywhere or the thing falling on the floor, or this one sticking its knee into the side of his leg, etc. It's a very uncomfortable ride, but it's kind of like, oh, this is what it's like to have kids. And then Henrietta goes on her way. She gets on the train to go visit her grandmother. And then that ends the book. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and open it up. And I hope that gives you, I kind of messed things up in the way I described what happens when, but I think what I've explained is exactly the confusion that some people had in reading the book, is you're not sure what's happening when. However, I would argue that presenting the book is one thing because it's a very sophisticated book, but reading the book, I have to tell you, it's one of my favorite books ever. I'm just going to put that out there. I consider it one of those life books for 150 million reasons that we'll now discuss. So I'm very eager to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and carry on and take everyone off of mute. All right, so that was like the worst presentation ever, and I want to apologize for making you suffer through it, but I don't want it to take away from the discussion of this book, because I'm very honest when I tell you that this is one of my all-time favorite books. So I can take it. Any of the criticisms that you have, bring it on, sisters, because I'm ready to go there. And I've got several pages of notes to keep you entertained. If we were in a court of law, I have a very good defense prepared for my client. So I just want you to know I'm ready to go, but I think the prosecution always goes first. So go ahead. Tell me what you thought.
Who was Mrs. Arbuthnot?
That was Henrietta's aunt.
Grandma.
Excuse me, Henrietta's grandma.
Grandma. Okay.
Yeah, that's her grandma. Yeah.
So Henrietta was really a foil. Is that correct?
Yes, you nailed it. Henrietta is absolutely a foil. She's almost a red herring foil because you think the book's going to be about Henrietta. And then all of a sudden you walk in the house and you're like, whoa, where are we going? So, yeah.
And what the hell was with the monkey?
I think the monkey is a sign of her, the only sign that's left of her that she's a child because, she's lost both her parents. To me, she's had to grow up pretty damn fast. So the monkey is a remnant of being a child. Does that make sense?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing she clings to.
Yeah, exactly. And she does cling. She doesn't like other people touching the monkey. I think the monkey's name's Charlie. It's like back away. She doesn't like anyone touching her stuff.
She's sort of, the monkey is sort of an imaginary friend. Like she imagines him seeing things and, reacting to things.
Yes, that is a great way to describe it, Gloria. Imagine your friend. I like that. And kids have them. Look, some adults have them. But the author has the scholarship on the author shows that she captures children well. It's a very honest portrayal of children. I don't know if you felt that way, but I could identify, what little kid wants to be stuck in an old people's house? There's no fun there at all. Don't touch, don't sit. It's one of those kind of places.
Well, and it also gets the adults being fatuous with kids, saying stupid things just because they're children.
Yeah, that's so true. And we get to see it from the child's point of view, like rolling of the eyes, like, God, this woman, like Henrietta's just going, this woman is a hot mess. Like I could wrap her around, whatever. She's pretty dismissive right away.
Well, and she knew she was only there for a very short time.
Right. So she didn't have to invest a lot in the relationship.
Right. Leopold, on the other hand, was very much up in the air what was going to happen with him.
Yeah, he reminded me of like almost like some type of savant or some child that you were like a little frightened of. Like, is he seeing right through? Can he see my soul? I don't know. That's just kind of how I saw him.
Perhaps he was on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, but then you also get that, he was like his father and his father had these uncanny abilities and instincts and so on. So, I think that's more, what she had in mind is this kid is just so smart and so seeing, but also so overwrought, sort of just like his father.
Yeah, and even Gloria on the very last pages, Ray makes that observation, something like he's foreign like his father, or he's dark like his father. He makes that, a nod to this guy's just like his dad.
Even though he gets a home, that's not like going to be a happy ending because, even with the best will in the world, and Ray certainly turns out to be a hero, but they're going to have a tough time.
Yeah. You just know that it's not said anywhere. It's just the way the author writes, that this is not a happy ending. You just know it's going to continue. The struggle continues. If you're looking for a book with a happy ending, you don't read this because that's not what this is at all. To me, it's so much more happy ending. That is, Amor Towles, he wraps things up very well with leaving just a sliver to keep you, excited for the next book, whatever. But this doesn't do anything like that. at all.
Why would Ray take it upon himself to go and pick up this child? Is it, I mean, it's like he's always picking up after Karen. And he was always telling Karen what to do.
Well, I think he'd become obsessed with the child to the point where it was bothering Karen.
Well, the child has always been a part. Once she told him about the child, it became the named elephant in the room from their relationship from the start, because she never wanted to marry him anyway, but it was the right thing to do. So now that kind of the truth comes out, look, there's this child. Ray does the right thing, which is take responsibility for the child. Whereas Karen, she wants to forget the past and just, which you can't blame her, and just move forward. But I don't know, you can't really ever escape the past. You just have to learn how to incorporate it into your life. And I think that's what Ray is offering her. And look, she did agree to come to Paris, at least she got that far, but then she got cold feet at the hotel, and Ray followed through. I think she named Ray for that reason. I couldn't find the reason for the names, so I just have fun opining on them. But he like Henrietta is also a foil. Henrietta is the she is the maitre d' and it gets us in, and then he is the valet who picks up your car and gets us out. Yeah,
but it's like he, the way she characterized him before she married him is he was so bland, he was so predictable, he was just a regular Englishman, boring.
But he wanted things his way.
Well, he wants things his way, but he turns out to have a really complex character and be capable of, thinking about Leopold and feeling about him, when he could just as easily have said, that's all in the past, that's foreign. He has a good home. I mean, no one could say he was living in bad circumstances that he had to be rescued from, except Leopold. But no one superficially would say that. So he really has enormous depths of character that Karen really never suspected.
Isn't he a war hero, or wasn't he in the war, or was he a diplomat?
I think he was a diplomat, and he gave that up to do business, basically so he could stay home with Karen, as I understand it.
He's the hero. I think if there is a hero in this book, because he is the opposite of Max, who ends his life. He is so troubled and so dark, such a dark character. So dark meaning he recognizes his weaknesses and he can't accept them. So he just decides to, or he can't live with the choices he has made, whereas Ray can. I really think, and some authors do this, I don't know what it's called, like twinning or whatever, but there's such a yin and a yang. Everything is so balanced in this book. And
Madame Fisher. Well, I guess Madame Fisher is balanced by Mrs. Michaelis.
Yes, but I feel she's like the master puppeteer.
Yeah.
Because she owns the house where everyone comes together. She manipulates the relationships. She is always poking, this passive aggressive. I don't really tell the girls what to do, but I'll certainly point it out when they do something wrong. Like, she when she finds out about Karen and Max, she wants to keep Naomi away from Max so Max and Karen can have a life together. Like, it's so mean. She's just
but what else she does is she insists that Naomi sees Max, like guilt trips her into doing that. And then she eavesdrops, which is how she found out about Karen. And then she confronts Max. Like she just had Naomi see Max for the purpose of being able to find out what was happening and then using it against them.
She is a master manipulator. Yeah. I mean, she reminded me of Kate of East of Eden, Steinbeck's East of Eden. That was one of the most scary characters I ever read in my life.
Yeah.
Like I would
Kate was a total sociopath.
Oh my gosh. I had to like shut the book and push it away from me. I didn't want anything crawling out. And this Madame Fisher, in a lot less words and a lot less pages, evokes that same evil. Like she's specifically garnering information to use against her own daughter. Perhaps she was jealous of her daughter.
I think she was.
Do you think, Gloria, that she was, Madame Fisher had a relationship at all with Max?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of says that a couple places.
Yeah, something's not kosher. Like,
I mean, not that it was acted upon, but that her relationship with this young man is she was sort of living through him in some way that she didn't want anyone else to have him. It was like this intellectual thing where she felt like she was forming him, but then I guess, Pygmalion, she fell in love with her creation.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Yeah, like that. She was just so evil. So incredibly evil to me.
Did we lose Mark?
And then can we talk about Mrs. Michaelis? Is that how you pronounce it? Michaelis? I don't know. Karen's mother is another one who is quite passive aggressive. She lets Karen live with her in discretion, waits for her to come out and say it. Doesn't she take a letter off of at the table in the hallway, or a note that she doesn't
takes the note? She takes the note that
tears it off.
Makes clear that she knows that Karen was lying about where she went.
Yeah, when her friend from the art school. Yeah, that was like, this master manipulation, the idea of secrets. Oh man, it just
she's not really evil. She just thinks things should be a certain way. And the idea that they aren't ultimately kills her.
Right.
It's like when her sister dies, they weren't close at all, but sort of the idea that her sister could die really shakes her up.
Yeah, we don't like change. We want everything to be the same. And she can't even understand why her sister-in-law, her brother-in-law is upset. In fact, they see that he's down because his wife has died, because he comes and stays with them for a little bit. And after he leaves, there are places where I laughed out loud in this book. She turns to her husband and says something like, well, maybe he did want to talk about Violet's death. Like, hello.
But then she found out that Karen knew that Violet was sick, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's this idea of, there's so many, I'm letting Martha back in. There's the idea of how of secrets and what role secrets play in our life. It just drips on every page. Let me go ahead and just.
I think at our last meeting, you mentioned something about little fires everywhere.
Yeah.
And Shaker Heights. So I started listening to that. And Mrs. Michaelis kind of reminds me of Mrs. Richardson. Like someone really of strong character and to some extent of strong morals, but really invested in things staying the same.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, one of the most sympathetic characters in that book to me is the principal. I don't know how far you are in the book, but what he has to deal with at the high school, I feel very bad for him. He's stuck with me. Very minor character. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the themes that are in the book, in addition to secrecy. Our author was interested in, quote, life with the lid on and what happens when the lid comes off, unquote. She was interested in the innocence of orderly life and the eventual irrepressible forces that transform that experience.
That really puts it well. Who said that?
This is that. Okay, the first quote with the lid is from the author, but the second one comes from A.S. Bryant, who wrote the introduction.
A.S. Bryant.
Bryant, yeah, who wrote the introduction to this particular book that I have, this particular edition. But just so we all know, she is an English critic, novelist, poet, and story writer. So she's when she wrote the introduction, and she also was someone who has read the book over and over throughout her life. We also have the idea of craving the spotlight versus shunning it, because we have Henrietta, who wants attention. She's lost both her parents. And we have Leopold, who has two adoptive helicopter parents who just like overanalyze everything he does, but all he wants is the attention of his mother. So this idea of betrayal, secrets, and silences that are all beneath the veneer of respectability is a theme in this book and a lot, evidently, of Elizabeth Bowen's work. Also, the idea of a 3-part book and the idea of a 10-year gap between past and present is used in other titles that she has written as well. She also uses the idea of imagination, and our characters do tend to what if. The past, that section does have an imagined history within it. And in it, we have characters that are in the past. So we're dealing with Karen, Naomi, Miss Fisher, and Max, and Ray in the past. All of them already have in mind a future and what that future is going to hold, because we have engagements. We have this idea of bendability, okay? Bendability. And this is something that is in the research that I did. This is from Timothy Dow Adams, and it's called Bend Sinister. That's the name of the article. And he says, Bowen herself discussed bendability of time in an essay published in 1951, in which she discusses factitious memory. One route to the past, or the idea of past, is factitious memory. That is to say, by art, we are made to seem to remember that which we have not actually known. I'm just gonna read it again, because it's not even noon for us right now. That is to say, by art, we are made to seem to remember that which we have not actually known. We're remembering something that didn't happen. We're remembering something that didn't happen. I find this absolutely, totally fascinating. And I just want to lay on the floor for hours and think about it. Just so incredible to me. Okay, there's also the idea of, and I did mention this a little bit, the word twinning. So in this case, it's used as intertwining. The past and present are intertwined, intertwining. I'm sorry, there was one N. I guess I'm thinking of the T. I'm getting all confused. Throughout the novel, Bowen shows that the past affects our future or present day. Karen imagines the latter after conceiving Leopold, but in the end, she's relieved. It is revealed that she imagines, her exchanges with Leopold. Together, we readers learn about Leopold's past when he constructs a past based on bits that he gleans from information from the house in Paris, what it could have been his life with his mother. In the book, dealing with time, no one ever really goes anywhere or does anything in this book. We're in the backyard, we're in a restaurant, we're in the house, we're having a nap, we're rolling upstairs, we're getting the door. There's not a lot of action per se. Characters are stuck in the, quote, architecture of the mind. So this, we also have a narrative that is purposefully slowing down our plot. So we're in the present and we're getting off the train and we're going to the house, and then we're going to go on, and we don't, because we're introduced to the past. So now we got to go back to the past. And every time we try to move forward, something happens that slows us down. We have Karen putting off her engagement. We have the death of Aunt Violet. We have, all these things just keep slowing us down. Even Madame Fisher, who it's explained, she knows she has to sell the house. She's been putting off the sale of her house until she dies. And she seems like someone who's going to live forever. And it is even discussed in the book how long she's going to live. She even acknowledges at one point that she's been waiting to die for over a decade. Okay. So just a few of the betrayals that I wrote down that give new meaning to the word Karen that today is used. So we have Madame Fisher betrays Naomi. She betrays Naomi by encouraging Max to choose Karen, enabling Max and Karen to begin their affair and betray their respective fiancés. Karen betrays her own mother by not saying that, she doesn't, that by not revealing her liaison with Max, or that her aunt's terminal illness. In fact, the narrator reports that Karen even didn't ask herself why. She just said nothing to her mom about her sister being ill. She just didn't mention it. She's not sure why. Karen obviously betrays Naomi. You really shouldn't sleep with your friends intended. And Karen even admonishes Max. She says, you can't do that to Naomi, meaning you can't leave her. And Max responds, did you always think that much of her? And Karen, what kind of friend is Karen? Another scholar on Elizabeth Bowen, Maud Ellman, asserts that Karen only loves Max, quote, precisely because he is another woman's. So she really makes Karen out to be an evil person like Madame Fisher. We have Mrs. Michaelis betraying her husband because what does Mr. Michaelis really want? Grandchildren. Well, that's not going to happen because she sends Karen on a year to travel or to study in Europe, which you do back then if you're of a certain class, so you can go ahead and have your baby.
That was the truth. That was what they did when I was a teenager. Girls would go away to visit, some relative for a year.
Yeah. I have a very close friend who is a result of that. Yeah. A result of a senior prom. And it was done. And there were houses, all over, even the United States, where you could send a young girl and then they'd be put up for adoption. So who knows? Maybe still going on I don't know. Okay. There also is, and this is a very interesting term, theory of wounds. So I'll just say it one more time, theory of wounds. And this is from Andrew Bennett in a book called Fanatic Immobility, The House in Paris. Because of Karen's betrayal of Leopold, the Bennett and scholar Nicholas Royal qualify House in Paris as Bowen's most rigorous and unremitting clairvoyant elaboration of the structure and effects of psychic trauma. The House in Paris is what we propose to call a traumaturgy, both a work and theory of wounds. So please help me pronounce this word that they made up because it's not in the dictionary. The first part of the word is trauma, and then the second part is turgy, like liturgy, or
dramaturgy. It actually rhymes with dramaturgy, so it's probably
like dramaturgy, right?
Okay, but I couldn't find it in the Oxford English Dictionary, which is the only app that I've paid for. So I feel like It would say it if it were in there. But anyway, so they're saying this is a work and a theory of wounds, about being wounded. And let's not forget that Ray, he's not 100% innocent either, because he betrays the Foster family by stealing Leopold, because they're expecting Leopold to come home. This is supposed to be a visit with his mother. This was not signing away papers forever. And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the glories of motherhood celebrated by Elizabeth Bowen in this book. Throughout this novel, and there's another novel that was made into a film that you may have seen, and I'll discuss the film and who was in it later, but it was called The Last September. There is this idea about motherhood re-examined from a very dark lens. I don't know if there are any good mothers in this book, except for the motherless Naomi. Karen speaks to wanting to correct her abandonment and be a natural mother to Leopold, but then she soon realizes that she would not lend herself to him. She wants to be a natural mother, claiming that Mrs. Michaelis, I guess, raised her, if I can, somewhat at a distance. We also have Mrs. Michaelis's and Karen's, basically the section of the book, which is a how-to in passive aggressiveness. We have Mrs. Michaelis's apathy and detachment to her daughter, although Karen went so far as to classify her mother as ruthless. Karen's mother's passive aggressive parenting caused a key power shift in them, because Karen says, she made me lie for a week. She would hold me inside the lie till she makes me lose the power I felt it had. Naomi wants to be a mother, can't be a mother. And then we have Madame Fisher and Naomi's relationship. Sure. There are two sections in the book where the word acid is used, and it is describing Madame Fisher. Max recalls that Madame Fisher, she acted on me like acid on a plate.
Oh,
Karen
like
thought,
well, but wait a minute, acid on a plate is like something about, making engravings, etchings.
Yeah, etchings.
Oh, wow.
So it's an artistic process. Where you bring out what you want and get rid of what you don't want.
Oh, Gloria, you are so smart. I love that. That even makes more sense. Thank you.
It's not like a dinner plate.
Okay.
Right.
So I was thinking acid, like just she'll ruin you. But you're saying it's making an indelible an impression. Like once she's touched you, it's like scarlet letter, like.
Well, it's also separating what you want from what you don't want.
Wow.
You want to know what I found for traumaturgy?
Please do. And if it's not in the Oxford English Dictionary, I'm not happy. So go ahead.
This was from somebody's student thesis, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Traumaturgy, a dramaturgical methodology for the processing of traumatic memory through the performance of autobiographical trauma narratives. And then there's a podcast out there.
Of course there is.
So just wait.
Podcast.
Well, just wait till I tell you about this author's life then, because Phyllis nailed it. Okay, now we'll get there. So let's see. All right, so we have that. Okay, yes. Let's skip that for now. Okay, I got a letter in the mail from one of our readers, because she was so taken with this book that she actually wrote me a letter, because she was talking about Elizabeth Bowen's use of light and dark in creating tension and setting the scene in this book. So once she told me about this, because I was absolutely under this book spell the whole time, at a loss for words to describe why, except it was great writing. But once she told me that, I started to mark every page where there was a reference to light and dark. And literally, it was like every page. The darkness, I'm just randomly opening up the book, okay? Page 182, the darkness of the sky. Page 183, Karen seeing the general threat to life that is ever present but seldom quite fulfills itself, saw why the clouds lying darkly over the harbor when she met Max's boat filled her with dismay. I was right, we were being threatened. She found Mrs. Michaelis standing facing the fire. Her figure stood in dark outline against the lamplight. I mean, once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. It's absolutely everywhere. Sun fell on the floor. Steps upstairs into the house had the same deadly intention not to know. Oh, I mean, this is just, to me, this is just such.
Why? One reason Miss Michaelis is different from Madame Fisher is Miss Michaelis isn't trying to find out everything. You know,
No, she's
she's denying everything. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you know, if I don't hear it, then I don't have to think about it. Then it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And then
Keeping up appearances.
Madame Fisher, you know, will go to any length to find out stuff she can use against people.
Yeah, she wants to scorch the earth of everyone's heart and soul. Like she's using a flamethrower, whereas Mrs. Michaelis is doing everything she can to keep the status quo. Because that is, I don't know whether that's a British thing and this is something to do with, you know, I understand that, you know, I don't want to use the word caste, but you know, so there's certain levels in society where you're to maintain a certain type of behavior and you just do not deviate from that. I guess that would be very Victorian, really Victorian. Okay, so also in addition to the use of light, there is the use of nature throughout the book that absolutely blew me away. We have bending grass, lupines, trees, clouds, poplars, daisies, cut grass, flowers, absolutely everywhere. And particularly in the scene in the backyard where they're having tea and Max and Karen's hands touch briefly. And when they take their hands off the grass, how it bends and then it goes upright again. And then Karen refers later in the book to Leopold being the impression in the grass they did not make. I mean, it just takes my.
And what about the cherry tree? Can we?
Oh, well, go ahead, Phyllis. Go ahead, Phyllis. You have this one. You just want to chuckle? Okay. We're just going to leave it at that.
We're chuckling with you.
Okay, good. All right. So just humor me for a minute because I had so many things underlined because the writing was so magnificent. So I just have to share a few passages. And if you didn't want to burn the book with several matches and covet it like I do, I'd love to know if there were certain lines that spoke to you. Here's a few of mine. Her dull work was done for the day. Her dull work was done for pity, her own pity, like a pavement artist's on a cold day.
What the hell's a pavement artist?
Like someone who draws with chalk. I mean, you know, in the end, the rain is gonna.
Yeah, wash it away.
If you're in England.
Yeah. Never to lie is to have no lock on your door. You are never wholly alone. I mean, I shiver.
There's so many things. Like, you know, I was reading it on a Kindle and I don't know, on my particular model, I don't know how to underline, but I would have underlined so much.
Gloria, if I could reach through the screen and give you a big hug, I would. I'm so glad you get it. Because either you get it with this book, it with a capital I, or you don't. And I think the people that don't capital I get it. It's because we have become readers who want to know everything right away. We've got to have it. We got to Google it. We got to look it up. We got to know right away, instead of the reading experience just being, which I always say is like this totally at this point, this sacred experience, just being alone and reading and letting the words flow over you, not looking up stuff. We have the world at our fingertips, but we just push it all away, and we're going to read, and we're going to let that mood flow over us. And this author does that because of the strength of her prose. Yes, Phyllis.
Now you've come to the problem that I had with the book. I felt as I was reading, the physical part of reading it, I was tripping over the words, the language, the sentence structure. I had a hard time with that. And that took away from the book for me.
You just articulated so well the feedback that I've heard from people who have struggled with this book. And I love your use of the word tripping. Because this book is written in a modernist way, it's considered modernism, and there's
I had that in mind when I started to read, because you said that.
Yeah, and also it's called, I'll get to the notes in a minute, but I want to remember this thought, otherwise I forget it. Free indirect speech. You have to throw out all of your rules and regs when it comes to sentence structure. I know that sounds crazy. Elaine Koenigsberg once told me, yes, she told me this in person. And then she's also written about it. So I'm not the first person or the only person to hear this. Let's make that perfectly clear. That you have to know the rules in order to break them when it comes to writing and grammar and that kind of thing. Our author is perfectly capable of writing a sentence using first person consistently, but like an artist, she chooses not to. It is such sophisticated writing, in my opinion, which is why you find these oddly fangled sentences that you
Fangled, that's right.
over and through. But I'm going to give you some advice, and it's probably repetitive at this point, but you have to forgive me because everything is new again, right? Several years ago, I started reading Mrs. Dalloway, and I called a friend and I said, what the hell is going on here? I'm going to get the Cliff's Notes. That's how long ago it was. And if you forget what those are, it was just your basic notes that you would get that was by a company called Cliffs, and you would read, and it had little mountains on it, the bottom of the cliffs, and it would tell you everything you needed to know about the book. And she said, don't do that. Virginia Woolf does not want you to go get Cliff's Notes. Just read the book. Just put it all aside and read the book. This was such an epiphany for me because I was one of those people, and I'm sure I'm talking to people who are of the same ilk. You like to do things right. You like to be thorough. You like to be in possession of all the facts and understandings. You like to look up words, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, this type of reading experience, particularly with modernism and Dalloway's stream of consciousness.
Yeah, that's what this is.
You have to let it go. You have to let that all go and just read. And don't worry if it doesn't all make sense right away. When you look at a Jackson Pollock, whether you like it or not, there is a story there. There is a message there. But it's not going to scream at you. This book whispers. This book is thought. This book is imagination. This is mind bending. This is time twisting. And you have to hop on and go. And then it'll all eventually fall into place, or it won't, but it doesn't it doesn't even really matter. So
I did not. I mean, my very smart friend Judy had the same reaction Phyllis did. And I didn't even think of it as a modernist work. I mean, to me, it reminded me of Doris Lessing, which I don't know if you would call her modernist or not, but it the sort of imagination and the gaps and the time stuff just didn't bother me. It was more like reading, a novel by Dickens or something. It's like, because people were living Victorian lives, and it was just describing them and then describing the disruptions of that. But I didn't have a problem with, I didn't sense it like the way you'd be reading Virginia Woolf and you'd go, what?
Well, I didn't have trouble with that part. It was literally the sentence structure that was driving me crazy.
It may just be a style that does not work for you. And
I don't know.
I find your comments very interesting, Gloria, and I would like to offer Anita Bruckner and Hotel du Lac and that style of writing as rather similar. That was very epistolary, but rather similar to this type of writing. We're a lot in the head of these people, in these characters. We're in their thoughts, and those aren't necessarily organized. Our thoughts aren't necessarily chronological either. If you have,
Faulkner.
if Faulkner, Ian McEwan,
that I can understand, that I can get to.
Julian Barnes.
Yeah, I do that too. I don't have a problem with that.
I would say she is
Faulkner, I've never been able to read.
Well, now you can. I think if you made your way through this one, you could probably go back. But I think that this one definitely is more stylized, if I could use that term, than the other authors we mentioned. Those are a little more straightforward, albeit Faulkner. We'll put a pin in that. Same thing with Joyce, but exactly. But this, I did not want this book to end. I wished it was.
God, I couldn't wait for it to end.
I finished it and wanted to read it again. And I actually read 2/3 of it or more the second time.
Wow. What was it that you liked about it, Gloria? Tell me more. Like was there a certain scene or with
constant insights, like everything that happens, it's sort of like there's so much why it happens, or there's so much, like general wisdom of how it happens. The people are overwrought and in some ways acting irrational, but she goes very, very far to saying how it seemed to them, what their reality of it was. And so the book seemed very rich with that kind of insight.
Wow. You're right. For me, it was purely the story and the prose. She made them minute to me, magnified and like epic, magnificent. How touching of a hand can completely change a life. Just a mere touch, that she magnified that in such a beautiful way, in an economy of prose. I truly admired. A coin of light from the tree slid off Max's foot. A coin of light. You just might, I got to go take some smelling salts. I got to lay down. Like, that is so gorgeous to me. And even the there's humor too in this book. A man with two women, devotedly watched by one, unwillingly watched by the other, often look foolish. Whatever he does is too weighty. This is humor, is being satisfied you are right. Irony, being satisfied that they should think you are wrong. I just think these are beautiful. Many sensations of pleasure made up the moment. Let me just read that again and listen for the letter M. Many sensations of pleasure made up the moment and harmed in the silence between Max and Karen like peas in a tree. The yellow, broken brick house, the dark windows glared at them down the lawn, not speaking at their pleasure, and not speaking made an island under the boughs of the cherry tree. But silences have a climax when you have got to speak. The English Channel rose and cut them off like a blade of steel. Amen. It's just so beautiful to me. I don't, okay. See, I'm running. I'm only using vowels at this point. I can't even find a consonant. Okay, here's another one, and then we're going to go on because I've got a lot more.
The book club is better than the recorded Zoom because you get to that point.
Oh my goodness. Okay. With 3 or more people, there is something bold in the air. Direct things get said, which would frighten 2 people, alone and conscious of each other in their nearness to one another. To be 3 is to be public. You feel safe. The person so close before becomes a face at another side of a tray. This is the book for a deserted island. This is the one. This is what you take. I mean, I am just, okay.
Kind of insight I was talking about, where she just really goes into.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That is such insight to think about how if you're 3, then there's safety, but one-on-one, it's just too much of a confront. It's too raw. It's too close. It's too much. It's too much. Jealousy is no more than feeling alone against smiling enemies. The building's vast. Jealousy is no more than feeling alone against smiling enemies. Buildings bask like cats in the kind heat. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Oh. Everyone waited for the trail to impale them in London, except today when they're on strike. Okay. I came up with another title for this book, which is The Worst Layover Ever. All right, I'm going to say a little more about this book, and then we're going to get into her bio. Okay. The House in Paris is the 5th novel she wrote, published in 1935. It's referred to as her most complex. In 1959, the BBC television made a film of the same name. I have not watched it. I'm so afraid to watch it because I don't want it ruined. This book, one reviewer said it talked about the importance of accepting responsibility, especially in the face of social hypocrisy. It's framed with friendship betrayed, undue maternal influence, and the reestablishment of family ties by youth. Both Henrietta and Leopold act as catalysts to fess up or to bring family together. Henrietta also is used as a foil, like Phyllis mentioned earlier, because she immediately we take a U-turn once we enter the house because we think it's all going to be about Henrietta, and we're on board. We're on the train. She's arrived. She has to look for the cocaine. We're at the train. We're going on the train. We're going to see Grandma. We're going. We're momentum. Train. Build. Everything shifts. So rather than learning about what happens to Henrietta in this book, which is basically nothing, we're jettisoned into the past, and we're all over the place. let's see. I also thought about Naomi's mother, and then I also thought about Dot's mother in the group. So this book is published in 35. The group is published, I believe, in 36, or no, it's about the class of 36. And we have two mothers. One mother is saying, you need to marry Ray, basically. You shut up and put up. Whereas Dot's mother was like, if you still love Dick Brown, gotta love that name, then you really need to work that out before we move forward with your engagement to the appropriate, real estate tycoon businessman out in Arizona. So I'm so grateful for this book group because I loved the idea when we can bring in other books to make comparisons and contrast, just like with Little Fires Everywhere that Gloria brought up earlier. Let's see. All right, now Bowen. I want to talk a little bit about Bowen in the book. She is considered an important 20th century author, but she is not well known, and I have no idea why, but I bet Phyllis has some thoughts about that. But anyway, moving forward. In 35, when the book was published, the publisher, Victor Galans, said in a letter to Bowen, quote, I wonder if you realize how un-British it is, meaning the book is un-British. So we need to dissect that because I couldn't find anyone who could dissect that online. And then our A.S. Bryant said, is it Bryant or Byatt? I can't remember. Byatt. A.S. Byatt says in her introduction, and this is from the 76 edition, though acknowledged as an important 20th century English and Anglo-English writer, she's not widely read. And why? Well, I tried to look around, and I think it's for a few reasons. She's hard to classify. Okay. It is said she is heir to Henry James, which I take great umbrage because I can't stand him, Ian Forster, and Virginia Woolf as what came after Bloomsbury. So this is like the Gen Z, Gen X, whatever they are, what came after Bloomsbury. And only as Irish studies was developed was she placed back in her albeit conflicted Irish context, because she is from Northern Ireland. Okay. Okay. So she is a, why do I want to say orange? Why am I thinking orange? Okay. Anyway, moving.
William of Orange. I mean, again, Orange is their
right, because they're Protestants. They're the North. They're the North. They're English. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because that was Country Girls, which I'm so glad I had under my belt when we read this too. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about her and her background. It'll even make more sense. Elizabeth Dorothea Cole Bowen. She was born in 1899 and she died in 1973. She's notable for her book about the big house of Irish landed Protestants. And also about fiction, and she also wrote fiction about life in wartime London. She was actually born in Dublin in 1899. Her father was a barrister, head of Irish gentry family, and they can trace their roots back to the 1500s of Welsh origin. I just love all that history. Her mother was Florence Isabella Pomeroy, and she died in 1912, so she's 13. She's 13 and her mother dies. She grew up in Bowen's court at Farahee. Now, I do not speak the Celtish language or the Gaelic language, so I'm going to cock all this up. In Kildare, County Cork, where she spent her summers. In 1907, her father becomes mentally ill. So she and her mother moved to England. So now she's 8 years old. In 1912, her mother dies and she's brought up by her aunts. I'm sorry if you hear my dog snoring in the background. In 1918, her father remarries. So this is her childhood. Okay. She is then educated at the Down House School, which is a public school, which are what we would call private school, but it's a very posh kind of public school. And I looked it up, and evidently it was involved in some type of price rigging scheme a few years ago, and they got in a lot of trouble. Anyway, it is there where she establishes her writing talent. She is said to have mixed with the Bloomsbury group, which is very fun. She also she had a friend in 1923, Dame Emily Rose Macaulay, who helps her get her first book published, a collection of short stories called Encounters. The same year, she marries Alan Cameron, an education administrator who subsequently worked for the BBC. The marriage was, quote, a sexless but contented union, unquote, said to be never consummated. I did not check this reference. I don't understand it. But anyway, I thought I'd share it. But don't despair on the love life of our author. She had various affairs. One with Charles Ritchie, a Canadian diplomat, 7 years younger than her, and it lasted over 30 years. She also had an affair with Sean Faolain, Sean O'Fallon, who was one of, pardon me?
O'Fallon, I think it's pronounced.
O'Fallon, okay. One of the most influential figures of the 20th century Irish culture. He was a short story writer and a commentator and critic. She also had an affair with the American poet May Sarton. May Sarton was the pen name of Eleanor Marie Sarton, a Belgian-American poet and novelist and memoirist. And although her best work is strongly personalized with erotic female imagery, and this is from the very reliable source of Wikipedia, she resisted the label of lesbian writer, preferring to convey the universality of human love. Bowen and her husband lived near Oxford, and they socialized with a bunch of people that I don't know, but evidently are very intellectual scholars and critics, and everyone you would see from Midsummer Murders and from, all those murder mysteries. In 1929, she writes The Last September. It concerns the life in Danielstown, Cork during the Irish War of Independence at a country mansion, aka Bowen's Court, because it mimics her own home growing up. There was a screenplay written by John Banville, and the film in 1999, so 70 years later, is released, called The Last September. You may remember it. I do. And I didn't even know about Elizabeth Bowen in 1999 because it had such a great cast. Maggie Smith, Michael Gambon, David Tennant, and also Kristen Thomas. It was filmed at a big house. So there's a lot of, I would say, autobiographical threads in our author's life that make its way into the book. So 1932, now going back, she moves to Regent's Park, not bad. In 1935, she writes The House in Paris, The Death of the Heart. So she writes 2 books that year. By 1937, she becomes a member of the Irish Academy of Letters. In 1930, she becomes the first and only woman to inherit Bowen's Court. During wartime in London in World War II, she worked for the British Ministry of Information, reporting on Irish opinion, particularly on neutrality. She's described as a Burkean conservative, which was very hard to track down, but basically she's a Tory. In 1948, she wrote a book that was also made into a film called The Heat of the Day. In 1952, she and her husband retire to Bowen's Court, but he dies a few months later. She has a salon there, and look who shows up: Virginia Woolf, Eudora Welty, Carson McCullers, and Iris Murdoch, who I really want to read. like Mark Twain, she lectures in the US for money to upkeep her house. And he was the same way, if you remember. He had that house up in Hartford, and he couldn't keep it up. So he had to go ahead and lecture, but she really couldn't keep up the house, which is too bad. So unfortunately, the house was torn down. Anyway, she wrote her final novel in 1968, and it was called Eva Trout or Changing Scenes, and it was shortlisted for the Booker. Let me tell you what that book was about. Okay, let's see. It says, it's a book about a young woman who, abandoned by her mother just after birth, raised by nurses and nannies, and educated by governesses, is hired by her millionaire father, has difficulty acting and behaving like an adult when, shortly after her father's suicide, she inherits all his money. So that's that story. In 72, she develops lung cancer, and at 73, she passes away. It's in 1977 where the first autobiography by Victoria Glendinning comes out. You can, I don't know if you're familiar with like historical plaques in London. You know, there's like little blue plaques. I'm holding up my hands in the air. You can't hear them, but they're these little blue plaques, and you can see where she wrote in Regent's Park at her home there, and also in Headington. There's also a plaque for her. So that is a little bit about her life, so you can see how it reflects a lot of what's also in her books. Do you have any other questions or things that you would dare say, would you recommend it to a friend?
No.
I would, but then, you know, with the caveat, they might not like it. But what I wanted to know is, did her biography show any connection with Jews? Because I mean, it really is a thread in the plot of this book, how, you know, strange, mysterious, suspect, gifted, etc. Max is because he's Jewish.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I could find nothing about that. And I will address the anti-Semitism that people see in the book and remind people that what she's done by describing Max the way she does is allow us to understand how authors portrayed the culture at that time. And it is not pretty, but it is definitely, it sounds very consistent with other books that we read at this time, and how, you know, Jews are dark, foreign, can't necessarily be trusted. These are tropes that appear throughout literature, you know, and in art. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So
it's also ambivalent. I mean, he's, you know, he's all those things, but he's also irresistible to everybody in the book.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it. I really, it's a great question, because I can't find anything in the literature, anything that I researched. I couldn't, was there a lover? Was there someone, you know, whatever.
Her other books?
I don't know. I started to read some of her short stories, and I haven't seen that trope at all.
What about, what's his face? Virginia Woolf's husband. I mean, if she knew that group of people.
Wow. I don't know. It's a great question. I don't know.
Tell me, who was Virginia Woolf's husband?
what was his name? Leo, was it Leo? I have to look it up. I don't know. Was he?
Leonard. Wasn't it Leonard Wolf?
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. It wasn't Al. Yeah, Leonard. I don't know. This was not an author where there was a lot for me, there wasn't a lot out there about her. Maybe Phyllis, you're pretty good at this. I could not find what happened to her father. Like, okay, he had mental illness, but then, her last book speaks of a father's suicide. So this is like a dangling chad for me. Did her father commit suicide? However, at the same time, we always, in our book club or when you read books, once we learn about the author, it definitely changes what we think of the book. And the question is, it's just a question I'll throw out there. Is that good or bad? Like, shouldn't we just let the art stand on its own? I mean, that was what Winslow Homer was all about. He's like, I'm not going to explain everything, or I'm not going to explain anything. Figure it out yourself. My job is done. Or J.D. Salinger, who wanted nothing to do with anyone. I find it fascinating to learn about the lives of the authors, and I feel it does enhance the book. But I don't know if it's the author's intent. I don't want anyone to know anything about me unless I voluntarily start the sentence with I. So I don't know. It's, are you familiar with Irene Nemirovsky's Sweet Frances? Okay, so Irene Nemirovsky was an anti-Semitic Jew. She wrote anti-Semitic books. One was, I think it's Daniel Goldner or David Goldner. She was French. And she wrote a book called Sweet Frances, which is about fleeing Paris during World War II. So it's a very meta kind of book. I loved the book. And then I researched Irene Nemirovsky, and that was such a mind-blowing thing for me that it made me, and I've evolved over the years. Oh, I've evolved, I've aged. And with that age comes a softening and a wisdom. But when it was such a conflict for me, like, first of all, it's one thing to read a book by someone who hates Jews, but when the author is a Jew, then you're like, there's something more here. And I even actually told someone who was going to bring it to her book club. She wanted to talk about the book. And I said, don't. I don't think you should bring it, because I really don't want to give her any oxygen. But today, I say, read it with abandon, because this is how we learn. So it definitely made the book more interesting, because then we know what happens to her. And it's her same hatred of Jews that ends up, killing her. Very complicated.
Lovely.
Stacey,
Yeah.
Stacey, I just want to say that I really like the idea of learning about the author, and that's why I like your book group so much. And like the first part of your book group today was just rehashing of the book, which I didn't read, and I apologize. But you usually say it's okay not to read the book.
It is. It is.
So I was trying that because I tried to read it and I couldn't get into it. I returned it to the library and I couldn't get it back. There was still a wait, like somebody's holding those books. Anyway, so Elise and I discussed it, and she said this is probably one of your favorite books because we couldn't get into it. So I love my sister-in-law. Okay, it's so true though. It's like, okay, so tell me again about why you really loved it and Under the Cherry Tree thing, because I think my computer went off when you were maybe touching on it.
Her
Max and the grass.
The way that she explained so much in using I use the term economy of prose, meaning very little. She wrote there's very few description of what happens, but I just felt the scene was profound. It expressed so much. We have a house that is the backyard, the face of the backyard house is bearing down across the lawn toward them. We have these two people sitting under a cherry tree saying absolutely nothing, while looking through the kitchen window is another person, the friend Naomi, who is always part of this, this trio,
Right.
who is almost like their servant, preparing the tea for them. And she's even dressed, she's wearing like a shmata and a thing on her head, and because she's been cleaning the house, and she's bringing the tea out to them. And meanwhile, this sophisticated, intense attraction, primal, sexual.
Okay, I get it now. Sounds good. Okay.
And there's a place right after they slept together where she refers to that again. It's like, this time the grass didn't spring up, like,
Yes.
something had happened that couldn't be undone.
I mean, just like in the end of the first chapter, the first section, she says, your mother is not coming, your mother can't come. And then she picks that up again at the beginning of the third section. Your mother, the way she weaves things together is so, it's just, look, I'm having like a headache. Like, it's just such a beautiful, it's such a complicated, it's not even complicated. It's like a symphony to me. Like I just.
Okay. How long ago? When did you read it first?
I read it maybe, let's see, where are we? 23. I probably read it in 3 or 4 years ago was my first time. Yeah. So it was recent. It was recent, but I swear to you, I feel like I've known this book my whole life. It's one of those books. It's so weird. It stays with you. There are certain authors that stay with you. And I really feared bringing it to the book group because it's personal, sharing a book like that. And I don't like to insert my own opinion into the group because I want it to be an organic conversation. I want to learn from everyone else. I don't want it to be a lecture thingy, which is why I so cocked up the introduction, because I'm just not good at that. So sharing it with the group, I have to be honest, Gloria's the only person who's liked it.
All of
I wanted to know your other group.
One. I'm doing it again tonight. I'm doing the book group again tonight at San Marco Books and More. I don't even know if anyone's going to show up. God bless them if they do.
You'll get it right by then.
Tell me if anyone else liked it, because I feel weird now.
Hey, thanks, Gloria. Thanks a hell of a lot.
You're a professional. I'm an amateur.
No. I did have one friend call me who's reading it because she heard I was reading it. And she said she's loving it, but it could be just because she's my friend and she wants me to feel better. I don't know. All right, my friends. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll hopefully see you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye. This was great.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.